Good morning.
Well, good morning. How are you?
Good.
Me too. Beautiful day, beautiful morning.
Yes.
Happy to be here
Me
always.
too, Carolyn.
Thank you, Dr. Rosensweet. And I welcome everybody who's going to come in already. Hello, Lori. Good morning. And we are going to get started with our questions.
All right.
Go figure. Okay. Excuse me. Starting off with number one. Okay, so she says, our questioner, I was doing really, really well on the 0.05 estradiol patch twice a week, but suddenly, bam, I started getting these panic attacks again, and my doctor wants to put me onto 200 milligrams of progesterone, and I'm wondering if this will help. Thank you.
Another good question. It's a good idea coming from her physician. Progesterone, as I've said many times, is an unusual hormone. It's the great calmer.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of other hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, these are animators. These have multiple functions, daily functions, and they also all can be recruited for the biology of the fight or flight response. They double in there and double up. They're energizers, animators. Let's go get that saber-toothed tiger. And not progesterone. It is the great calmer. As I said several times, if we were to inject intravenous the proper dose of progesterone into woman or man, we could be put to sleep so deep surgery could be performed on us. And the implications of that is, my God, calming, sleep. So it's so common for women in the perimenopause and in menopause to have sleep disturbances. There's other hormonal reasons for sleep disturbances, including majorly estrogen deficiency. But that behaves a little different than progesterone deficiency. And it's very common that women who don't really have anxiety, all of us have challenges, as they enter the perimenopause and the menopause, they start developing anxiety, a certain nervousness, etc. And very often it's from insufficient progesterone. So we're always eager to identify this in perimenopausal women, even in their early 30s.
Right.
And augment progesterone. And topical progesterone works really well in the early 30s. And it'll calm a woman down. In fact, we have to be careful with it. If a woman's going to be taking progesterone topically in the daytime, if she takes too much, she's going to get groggy and a little loopy and not be able to drive a car necessarily or operate 52-story cranes in a major building, nor fly commercial airlines or any kind of airplane for that matter.
I was going to be doing both. I guess I better not take my.
Yes. Don't take your jet up today if you're going to be taking your progesterone.
It was more working on the crane, but anyway.
Oh, the crane. Okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, don't work on the crane on the day that you want to take progesterone in your daytime.
Got it.
So the thought of giving extra progesterone, even up to 200 milligrams, is a decent idea. Now, having said that, I think the patch and oral progesterone in combination is mark in advance above the original most common treatment of women in menopause in the 20th century, which was Premarin and Prempro, horse urine-derived estrogens, and Prempro also had it combined with a progestin molecule. And I'm not here to criticize. There's so many women who were on Premarin and Prempro that did so much better than their counterparts in menopause that were not treated with any hormones. However, unfortunately, the field of treating women in menopause has advanced enormously since the 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. Oh
Is
my
that
God.
where he is like ginormously?
Ginormously. And
Yes.
like in the 1980s, Dr. Wright and Jim Herntzer, among pioneers, both developed topical pure hormones like estrogens. Jim developed a totally pure estradiol, put it up in a base and gave it topically. Dr. Wright thought up of using first estrone and estradiol and estriol in a triest, and then he switched over to biest for a topical application made up by compounding pharmacists. I'd like to put a shout out for compounding pharmacists. Oh my God, I know so many of them, and I have such deep gratitude for them, for their love of being pharmacists and for the phenomenal work and good that they've done on this planet. And I'm part of a coalition to help protect them, because when the Women's Health Initiative gave out wrong information in 2002 and scared the 18 million women and all the healthcare providers that were treating women with hormones, and that and women just stopped doing their hormones, and healthcare providers, many of them, refused to give women hormones anymore based on false information. The Women's Health Initiative, false information. There was never a statistically significant increased risk. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here. And so the science facts are we're all at risk for thousands of diagnoses. Every day that I wake up and I'm walking and talking, I'm so grateful.
I know, huh?
And we're all at risk for cancer. As a man, I have special risk for prostate cancer.
Right.
And there's reasons for that. And as women, you have special risk for breast cancer, and also uterine cancer and ovarian cancer. There's reasons for that. And it's good to know those reasons. And it's good to have a health coach or a functional medicine provider that knows how to prevent that, or you can learn how to prevent that yourself. But there's always the mystery. But the bottom line is women who are treated with hormones in menopause are at less risk for developing breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are untreated. And that's even with respect to Premarin and Prempro. That's actually about Premarin and Prempro. Less risk for developing breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who go untreated. So
I want to walk around with a recording of you saying that everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Because
we want to keep on getting the word out on that. And the consequences of not taking hormones, they are egregious.
Mm-hmm.
They ultimately, just to cut to the chase, lead most women to assisted living facilities and nursing homes when they don't have to be there. They can be staying at home just from hormones, the majority of them.
Lose those hormones.
So, I think I've taken a slight bit of tangent. Well, in the 80s, when compounded bioidentical hormones came out, they became the state of the art, no doubt about it. Oh, God. Now, Big Pharma started realizing that they were losing market share to compounded bioidentical hormones, and they put up a major fuss, and we've got a major coalition trying to deal with that fuss. But they started coming out with better products, and the patch, and this is where it all began with your question, the patch and oral progesterone are an improvement. Now, they're not my favorite by far. I mean, for one thing, I question the delivery method itself. 2 days a week, and do they really give out steady states as there's claimed? I say no. We've done tests on this, 24-hour urine hormone testing, and they don't behave. You get the exact dose every day. The 2 days a week is a convenience thing. So, yes, the estradiol patch plus prometrium is an uptick because you're dealing with bioidentical. There are other chemicals in that patch, but you are dealing with bioidentical estradiol, and that's an uptick from the horse urine-derived estrogen and the progestin. And however, it is not my favorite.
Right.
And my favorite is a biased for estrogen applied topically twice a day. And there's reasons for that. And in Happy Healthy Hormones, the book that Carolyn's put up on ins and outs of menopause, that you can download the PDF version for free, I go into great detail about the importance of biased, the importance of estriol that's in that biased. So it's such a common story that the questionnaire has posed. I was doing pretty good. Yeah, because estradiol's a good thing to take. And also there's choices about even dosage of estradiol, and progesterone's a good thing to take. I was doing pretty good, and then I'm not.
Right.
And so I'd like to take you to the top of the mountain there, questioner, by saying when you get involved with a healthcare provider that really is specializing in treating women in menopause with compounded bioidentical hormones, we take on the real issue, which is your individual situation. And we just keep going until we get your balance right. And there's a wide variation, woman to woman, between how much of anything you need, what the balance of the 4 ovarian hormones are, whether you need thyroid in there as well, and how sensitive you are to anything that you're given. I mean, the variation is rather ginormous as well. No big deal to someone who really loves the field and is specializing in it and knows how to dial it in. In the menopause method, it takes us between 2 and 4 months to dial it in, and sometimes even longer to truly individualize it, and then wind up doing 24-hour urine hormone testing on a woman to really dial it in. And so that's what I'm going to recommend, that is Evolve. Moving to the patch and Prometrium was a decent choice, and you could evolve further. And there's something majorly missing from your hormonal program, and that is testosterone and DHEA, minimal. We don't know what your thyroid's at. Half to 2/3 of the women in midlife and many men are functionally low on thyroid. So part of the menopause method, for example, is we really zero in on that thyroid as well. And we treat every single woman with testosterone and DHEA, because 100% of all women 3 years after their last period will be very low on testosterone and DHEA. Proper treatment with testosterone is what keeps you walking and not needing adult diapers.
Right. And then
the assisted living and the nursing homes. So
right.
This is crucial to get this right. And these days I'd say 90% of the new page, 95% of the women that I meet up with in the perimenopause and in early menopause are also already low in testosterone. They've overtaxed those ovaries from recruiting wonderful testosterone for the fight or flight response. And the women are feeling it. The women are saying, gee, I used to be so motivated. I used to be able to make decisions, the 1,000 decisions I need to make in a day. No problem. Now I'm getting more timid. I'm not as motivated. I'm not as clear. This is androgen deficiency, and I'm developing flab in the triceps, and I'm not able to get off the floor. I'm not able to leap off the floor like I used to be able to, spring like a kangaroo off the floor like I used to be able to do. You are low in androgens, and my libido is dropped. What do you know? So there's so many, androgens that are important. So estradiol patch and Prometrium, well, congratulations, you're on your way. But androgens, and is there a more elegant way to do it? Read Happy Healthy Hormones. Fine, go shopping. Your job comes down to this. Go shopping for a healthcare provider who's specializing in treating women with compounded bioidentical hormones.
Yes.
Do you sometimes wish, Carolyn Shapiro, that I would have a short answer?
No, actually, to be quite honest with you,
I think you're an aficionado.
Your answers are fascinating. So. I learned from the best. Are you kidding? I wonder who that is. I've got lots of questions here. So let me get to these, and we'll get to those, and let's just get through this. This hour goes so fast. Okay, so, in talking about this, questioner says a woman can be very low in estrogen, but oddly still be estrogen dominant. So how does she know if she's estrogen dominant, even if she's low in estrogen and having all those symptoms? And then what can she do about that? Does that tie into like the last answer?
Well, it certainly is an important question. And that questioner is describing something that is extremely common. And we go into detail on that in Happy Healthy Hormones because this is what happens. Well, there's 4 ovarian hormones. There's the estrogens. That's really a family.
Yes.
There's 3 principal estrogens. And then there's progesterone, and then there's testosterone, and there's DHEA. And a woman's ovary, just like a man's testicles, we're putting out our very best hormones that we'll ever see in our whole life on Earth when we're 20, plus or minus a couple of years.
All right.
So let's look at estrogen and progesterone as I'm graphically demonstrating on this screen. They're in a very exquisite balance. Estrogen's a stimulator.
Yeah.
It stimulates endometrial lining. It stimulates breast glandular proliferation and preparation for lactation and possible pregnancy every single cycle. And progesterone balances that stimulation, keeps that endometrium at the proper thickness, keeps the mood balanced, prevents overstimulation by estrogen. And let's say at age 20, they are very balanced. And then they're both declining over time. So by the early 30s, some women are even feeling that decline.
Yes.
Now here's the rub, a rub. They don't necessarily decline in the exact same amount. In fact, it's common for progesterone. I think this hand is progesterone. Hello, I'm progesterone. Progesterone tends to decline deeper and faster than the estrogen does, earlier and deeper. They don't decline necessarily in a balanced fashion. So even though a woman is that, I'm trying to do the mirror image of this, and I'm not doing a very good job. Even though a woman's estrogen is declining and she's had less estrogen than she's had, that progesterone could have declined quite a bit lower. And the balance isn't there anymore.
Okay.
She's at a lower estrogen level than she's ever been as an adult, but she's at a much lower progesterone level, no progesterone balance. And so that situation biologically results in estrogen effects predominating, and the progesterone balance just isn't there like it used to be. So what's estrogen effects? Stimulates breast glandular tissue to preparation for breastfeeding as early as every single cycle. So she gets increased breast glandular growth without the balance of progesterone, so she can start getting breast tenderness.
Yes.
Estrogen stimulates the uterus.
Yes.
Not a problem, but when it doesn't have the progesterone balance, she can start getting uterine cramps. She can start getting excessive bleeding that she wouldn't have because she doesn't have the progesterone balance. This is what's known as estrogen dominance. Estrogen is dominating the world that it used to be balanced with. And so you're getting estrogen overstimulation. So you're getting breast symptoms, uterine symptoms, mood symptoms, and that's how it happens. Doesn't happen in every case, but it's a very common thing. So what's the remedy? Over-the-counter progesterone has been, I mean, I love our organic oils progesterone.
Oh yes.
Definitely. Organic oils progesterone are in it. But they're not over-the-counter. Ours are prescription items. And over-the-counter progesterone gels, creams have been available since I think the late 80s, thanks to Dr. Jonathan Lee. And you can get them, and I suggest you get them and use them. If you're starting to get symptoms of estrogen dominance, read our book. You'll learn what those symptoms are.
Please, small interjection. My favorite pages, other than all the other millions of pages in the book that are great, 326 and 327. Those pages are so good. because they help show you where you're at.
Yes. So if you're in your 30s and you're developing estrogen dominance symptoms and your progesterone's doing that earlier and deeper decline, get thee some progesterone and start using it. It's so safe, progesterone. Now, there are some women who don't tolerate it, and that's another subject for another day.
Yeah.
But that's pretty rare in young women because your body as a woman, you're used to 100 times more progesterone each cycle than you have estrogen. That's the original design. Milligram for milligram, you have 100 times more progesterone excreted during a cycle. Whoa, there must be a use for that particular hormone. So, yeah, when it declines, get it over the counter or contact a specialist, because the earlier you pick up on these hormonal declines and you start addressing them, oh my God, it's one of those cases where an ounce of prevention is worth 82 tons of cure. The earlier you get onto this, you're going to be so grateful. For one thing, a lot of women lose their libido.
Yeah.
And it's recoverable in a lot of women, but it ain't so easy. So if you have libido and you want to keep it, better you should start in your 30s getting your hormones in order and learning how to do the process. Read our book, Happy Healthy Hormones. You'll learn what you need to learn. But here's what you really need to learn. You need to go find a healthcare professional who can write prescriptions for this and is specializing in treating women with compounded bioidentical hormones. We have the menopause method. Look us up. We're the best.
Without a doubt.
Proud to say. But
working into that, yeah.
There are many physicians out there and nurse practitioners who've taken this on. And if they've really taken it on to really specialize in it, that's what you need. You need to go shopping for one of these folks.
I absolutely agree. And with extreme gratitude, I must say, yes, life-saving. I'm welcoming in everybody. You're coming up as Facebook users mainly, but I do see Lori and Dawn and everybody. And as always, we'll get to you, promise. I'm going to move on to question number, okay, so is it okay for me to use, speaking of progesterone, use my progesterone oil throughout the month, even when I have my period? My doctor says that this is fine for me to do, but I always stop when I have my period, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm amazed at the questions we get.
Oh, they're mind-blowing.
There has been a case made to follow the pattern of hormonal output that is the natural pattern. And we show graphs of that pattern, or you can Google what does a menstrual cycle look like hormonally. You can Google that and see it. It's a very interesting curve. Carolyn, maybe you'll hold that up if you show that curve.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. Hang on. But anyway, so yeah.
And there has been a case made for mimicking that as you start to replenish hormones. In fact, I'm so proud to announce for the first time on Carolyn's In and Outs of Menopause Facebook Live, this is the first time I think I've ever announced it, that I won half of the Berkeley High School Math Cup.
What?
I did. I shared it with my friend Louis Sempliner. If you're listening, Louis, I remember the day we were awarded this, the High School Math Cup. What in the world does this have to do with anything? Well, I always like to drop that little.
Well, that's a major achievement, I must say.
No, I always like to drop it so people will understand that I am half owner of the Berkeley High School Math Cup. And the significance of that is I love math. So there came a time in my menopausal treatment career that I thought, Why don't we mimic? Here we go. Look at what Carolyn's holding up there.
I'm trying to show you with
Yes,
my little camera.
it's that top graph.
Can you see?
And
This is all backwards. This is really weird.
well, it's pretty good though. And
so, ladies, by the way, to interrupt, and I'm so sorry, Dr. Rosensweet, that is page 167.
it shows what a month looks like as far as estrogen output and progesterone output. And they follow these curves. They're really interesting. This is estrogen. It's really low while you're menstruating, then it rises, and by day 12, it's at an absolute maximum, and you ovulate, hopefully. And then it drops quite low, mid-cycle there. And then it rises again, about 2/3 of what that peak was, and then it falls off near the end of the cycle. Progesterone's different. It starts out low, and then around mid-cycle, if you ovulate, and by the way, only if you ovulate, it goes really high. Oops, I went off the page, because remember I said it was 100 times more progesterone. How people usually demonstrate those curves, if they make the progesterone curve look like mid-cycle, okay, here comes the progesterone, sort of equaling the estrogen, but that's not how it really looks. And that's the cycle, that's the normal cycle. So I, like others, got interested, why don't we just copy nature and have women have variable dosing throughout a cycle?
So let me ask you this. Did that Berkeley math half cup winning help you with that?
Well, yes, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, it's interesting.
Because I wound up moving from the Berkeley, half the Berkeley High School math cup. I just own half of it. I wound up staying interested in math, and when Excel spreadsheets came out, oh boy, did I love those, and do I love those. So what I used to do with my patients is I knew how much, for example, bias they used in a month.
Okay.
Because we did dose determination processes, and I learned how much bias they need in a month. And then I pumped it into an Excel spreadsheet and took the same total amount, but spread it out according to the curves. So I would send women these Excel spreadsheets that would tell them how much estrogen and how much progesterone to take every single day. And it was variable.
Wow.
And I've been blessed with a very motivated, compliant demographic of women. So every single one of my women patients got one of these spreadsheets, and they were also interested in copy nature, right? Well, Dr. Jonathan Wright and I were talking about this, and he has a laboratory that does the 24-hour urine hormone testing. And he said, gee, why don't we test them? Let's test them on day 7. Day 12 is usually the day of greatest output, and day 21. And we did that with several women, and oh my God, we had a shock. The shock was the lowest level was on day 7, makes sense. Day 12, when it should have been the highest, was medium, and the highest level of these hormones was on day 21. We tried to copy nature with the Excel spreadsheet, but it didn't work out that way. Now, here was the most interesting part to me. Like I say, I've been blessed with a tremendously compliant and motivated demographic of women patients in menopause. And we have an annual a checkup with all of these women. And woman by woman by woman by woman would show up for their annual checkup, and I would say to them, how's that variable dose cycling going? What do you think of that spreadsheet? And they said, sheepishly sometimes, or embarrassed, well, to tell you the truth, I'm not doing it anymore. I much prefer the steady dosing. I feel much better on it. I've abandoned it. I didn't have one single patient that kept it up. I had every single patient try it out, but they didn't feel as good. And so, coupled with the testing and the most important thing, my patients, we abandoned that in 2006. What am I getting at? It makes theoretical sense to take your hormones according to mimicking those cycles, but it turns out in practical and testing, it doesn't work out at all. And so once a woman starts taking progesterone and Biest and testosterone, we are proponents, strong proponents of exact dose, steady dose every day of all three.
Yes.
Now, there is one cycling piece that we do. We have women stop their hormones once a month.
Mm-hmm.
For ease, some women like to stop on the full moon. Other women like to stop on the first day of the calendar month. It's a little easier to stop on the first day of the calendar month. And the purpose of that, if they stop their hormones, their bodies start getting reduced levels of hormones. So once a month, what we do is we prevent hormones accumulating in a woman's fat tissue, because these hormones are fat soluble. And
Right.
if you have 3 extra molecules of hormones that you took during the month, more than what you needed, eventually your body would build up into excessive levels. So stopping once a month prevents that. How long do we have women stop for? Well, we say, put your hormones in a holster, just like Gene Autry and the Lone Ranger and Hopalong Cassidy wore holsters. We suggest, I bet you not every woman tuned in here remembers these historical figures of tremendous stature, cowboys of the Wild West. I'm sure Carolyn does because she grew up in LA.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that you met one of these 3 stars, did you?
They lived with us.
Oh my God. All 3 of them and their wives?
Yeah, in the pool house.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I'll try and get us back reined in here.
It has to do with, taking progesterone throughout the month, and especially if a woman has her period. This woman is afraid to take the progesterone during the
Yes, and she does not have to be concerned about it, because the levels of hormones that you're taking will not stop your period or interfere with your cycle. They're just, those dosages just aren't high enough to do it. And it won't continue your cycle. And it won't prevent you from going into menopause. You're taking hormone levels that are appropriate for, we define that very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Appropriate for a woman in menopause, and appropriate to protect your vagina and your bones, for example, and not go into excessive amounts. You will not keep that period going with those levels. You definitely can get excessive levels that will keep your period going. You will need to keep your period going, or to get it to recur. If it's stopped, you're going to need to produce hormone levels in your body that are 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal. 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal, not the mean. Right. The upper limit of normal, 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal that a 20-year-old has. That's a lot of hormone. That's what it takes. We know that. I've tested this, and I'm not just inventing this. That's why I'm absolutely not a proponent of keeping cycles going. And we discuss this in the book. Now, how long do we have the women stop? I left off on holsters and Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and the Lone Ranger and Hopalong Cassidy.
Yeah.
That was all about the holsters. I don't meander. Don't accuse me of meandering. Because we have women stop their hormones until they get their first symptom of insufficiency. So this is a common scenario. The women stop their hormones on the first of the month. They're not taking any hormones in that first 24 hours, and they feel fine. And in the second 24 hours in the evening, they get a hot flash. what we learned is their hormone levels sort of maintained in decent levels just from what they had on board in their strategic reserve called their adipose tissue or their fat tissue, because these things are fat soluble. So when they stopped their hormones, the fat started contributing their stored strategic reserve hormones, outgassing, so to speak. So they didn't get symptoms that first day.
Right. But
They did get symptoms the night of the second day. From that moment on, we have women stop one day. A month. We don't need a woman to get symptoms every month. No, that's disturbing. It's disruptive. It's kind of challenging to recover from that. So we stop for one day less. Now, some women, they'll go 3 days before they get their first symptoms. So if they got their first symptom on day 3, we have them stop for 2 days a month. If they got their first symptom on day 5, wow, they must have built up quite a strategic reserve there. We have them stop their hormones on day 4. And we really examine what their dosages really were, because if they could go 5 days without getting a symptom, they might be too rich. Well, we're doing 24-hour urine hormone tests on women, so we always detect it that way also. So another swift answer to a simple question that wound us winding our way into Hopalong Cassidyville.
Well, yes, in Gene Autry in Tarzana, California.
There you go.
I just gave away the secret. Oops. So sorry, everybody. Named after Tarzan, actually, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great.
It's really true.
Good thing to know.
Yeah, just down the way, especially in a menopause group, absolutely imperative that we know this information. It is fun and it is interesting, though, I must say. So moving along, 15 years ago, I had a radical hysterectomy. Everything taken out. I was never given hormones.
You're reading the question of a patient, right?
I am.
Yes, right.
However,
Yes.
I can kind of relate to this.
Yes.
Other than this part. And she says, I had endometriosis and they were unable to get all of it. So can I take compounded bioidentical hormones? Is that safe? It's just really also confusing to me, she is saying.
The short answer is yes, with caveats. And a woman who has had a total hysterectomy has an indistinguishable process from a woman who goes into natural menopause and her ovary stops producing. So you're as excellent a candidate for compounded bioidentical hormone treatment as anyone is. 15 years later, there's a couple things to think of. I'm assuming that you've had no endometriosis symptoms for quite a while since that surgery. Was that built into that question, Carolyn?
It was not. Everything.
I'm going to make a guess that there's no longer endometriosis. It would be enormously unlikely that she would have that endometriosis would be a problem at all. Close to zero. You never say zero in medicine.
Right.
My guess is, as far as hormones go, yes, congratulations if you get to start these up and replenish these to good levels. 15 years is a long time to go without hormones, and you probably have some effects of those low hormones. And we address you differently. Because your receptor sites have not seen hormones for 15 years, we're more careful and slow in starting you up on hormones. Now, I've treated women after 30 years of no period.
Yowza.
I treated my own mother and mother-in-law in their late 80s for the first time they had. So we're talking 40, 50 years since their last period.
Right.
To their advantage.
Right. Even better.
Yeah. And so, but we start low and slow with women because hormones are about the hormones and the receptor sites that they interact with. And when a woman stops having hormones, her receptor sites go dormant. So we tend to not want to flood those with a tsunami. So we tend to want to start low and go slowly. Now, having said that, just recently I started treating a woman who hasn't seen hormones for 30 years.
Oh
She's in
my.
her 70s. This is the first time.
Wow.
And lo and behold, she is tolerating a usual common way that we address a woman in menopause. So this is what individualization is about. And
Yes,
it's so
yes,
important. It's
yes.
so important to do that. But there's one other caveat. Estrogen is marvelously protective to arteries. As I've said before on this Facebook Live, you hardly ever hear of a woman having a heart attack in her 40s or 50s.
Correct.
In fact, in medicine, I don't know that I may have heard of one. And there was reasons why she did. But it's not uncommon in medical circles when doctors have seen a lot of patients that you hear of a man never sick a day in his life, keeled over on a tennis court with a heart attack. And the difference is estrogen. Estrogen is protective to arteries. So there's a certain number of women who haven't seen estrogen for 15 years that we get concerned about their arteries. Now I've reviewed this topic very carefully with a pioneer in treating women in menopause since the 80s. Because the information to look out for atherosclerosis, that if you treat a woman who has a clot in a coronary artery, there's this thing called the window of opportunity. It's different than another window of opportunity. That if you treat her and she's already got a clot in her coronary arteries, that for 1 year only, this is really outrageous, she can be susceptible for that clot breaking loose and her having a heart attack. It's called an embolus, and it's the primary way that heart attacks occurs, from the clot. So there's some of these women that we are cautious with to the point where we'll refer them to a cardiologist to get an echo stress test, which is a non-invasive way to see if you've got a clot in your coronary artery. Because if you do, well, for certain, we are not going to give you oral estrogen.
Yeah, right.
We're not going to give you oral estrogen anyway. From my opinion, no one should be taking oral estrogen. It should only be topical. And one of the reasons is that estrogen affects the coagulation mechanism.
Yes.
But this is a different mechanism. It's estrogen relaxes the arteries. Oh, isn't that interesting? Estrogen relaxes the arteries, and you relax an artery with a clot in it, it can break loose. So sometimes, and I've done this, when I met up with patients in their 70s and 80s, and they haven't seen hormones for 20, 30, 40 years, I'll carefully take a history on them, and I'll get suggestions, and I'll get an intuition that I want to have them evaluated by a cardiologist. Or bottom line, I'll want to write a requisition for them to get an echo stress test to see if there's a clot in there. Now, having said that, this information emerged in the last several years that a clot could break loose if you treat an elderly woman who hasn't seen estrogen with hormones. And I was reminiscing with a genius who's been on this show. His name is Jim Hernser.
OMG.
You're out there, Jim. Hi, he's a prescribing compounding pharmacist.
What a great interview that was.
A gift to women on this planet, both for the work that he's done treating women over the years, advising their physicians on the proper treatment, and also for the work he does to help protect compounding pharmacy and these hormones, which are in great jeopardy. I met him in front of the National Academy of Sciences in a meeting we both attended. Anyway, Jim and I were reminiscing of all the women we treated over the years who had high risk for coronary artery because of being significantly overweight or smokers. and we treated them with hormones, and we've never had one of those events because we didn't know. We didn't know what we didn't know. That information about that clot breaking loose is of relatively recent vintage. So we thought of all the diabetics who are definitely at risk for arteriosclerosis, because we didn't think we didn't know about this information. It's emerged very recently. So anyway, it's a minor thing, but it does give you an idea of how careful and how much rigor those of us who really love getting this right, what
Right.
extents we go to
So then
get it right. That's why, but all this translates into only one thing for women. Go shopping. Keep traveling. Keep trying until you arrive that you're working with a licensed healthcare provider that is specializing in treating women in menopause with compounded bioidentical hormones. That's your only real job.
Right. And so that person would probably then, like you, be able to explain the whole endometriosis thing, and maybe that it doesn't just sit one place, but can go in
that thing. Then that thing, which this is thank you for reminding me that's where this question originated. But there was a second part of this questionnaire. She hasn't seen hormones for 15 years. Cool. And that's why I went down that particular pathway to say, well, we want to pause and assess your coronary artery risk. And just because it's so cool to individualize every single woman and do the right thing. So we're not putting a woman at excessive risk. Absolutely. And we know what we're doing there. So anyway, thank you, questioner. And once again, I want to tell you that today, oh my God, I have a super hard stop.
I can't believe that. I don't know if I believe you.
Today it's a super hard stop.
Super hard stop really means that that's pretty serious. So I better get on the ball. Then maybe, well, I don't know. Take us out with this. Can you explain what SHBG is and why it happens, and is it dangerous?
Yes, I will. Another great question.
Yeah.
I don't know how many questions we've done since we started doing this, however long ago we started, which it seems like it's quite a while ago. And I can't think of a question that hasn't been just really excellent. I would like to say that this book, someone asked us about the book, and there is a paper copy, and one well-known, not to be named on the air, distributor of all kinds of products has it. So they're printing it, and they'll get you a copy of Happy Healthy Hormones. It's always been printed right from out of the gate, and here it is.
Yep, there you go.
And that well-known distributor of all things, who's made a mint and needs to pay taxes and redistribute the wealth and treat their workers better.
Just to say.
How about giving them health insurance?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say this on the air?
No. That big distributor in the sky.
Sex hormone binding globulin. That's what SHBG is.
Yes, it is.
Sex hormone binding globulin is one of several proteins that's floating around in our bloodstream. And our serum proteins are extremely important. Oh my God, they're important. And sex hormone binding globulin. What's the globulin part? That's a big protein. And it has, you've heard of globulin before, you've heard of gamma globulin. In that case, that floating protein, the gamma globulin, is part of your immune system. It's one of the many mechanisms your immune system uses to gum up germs and make them, immobilize them. Well, sex hormone binding globulin is a whole other function of these proteins that float around in our body, because hormones, for the most part, all of the ovarian hormones, are fat soluble. That means when that ovary puts out that hormone, it can't dump it into the bloodstream naked, because
Right.
it would be a fat globule floating around in the blood. Not okay. I mean, picture your salad dressing. If you're doing oil and vinegar, you see fat globules and you have to shake it up, right? But, whoever created and designed the human body is just outrageous beyond words. So a natural mechanism was designed to carry these fat soluble hormones around in the blood so that they can go from ovary to almost every cell, tissue, and organ in the body. And it produces serum proteins to bind up these hormones that the ovary or the testicle or the thyroid excretes or the adrenals excretes. They're immediately picked up by these proteins. They're carrier proteins. They're like taxi cabs, is Dr. Berkson, another one of our amazing allies,
Yes.
pioneer in this work and genius,
Yes.
resident genius
Yes.
in treating not only menopause and hormones, but many other things. Read her books, Devaki Berkson. Follow her podcasts.
Incredible.
Yeah. These binding proteins act like taxi cabs, and they pick up the hormones that bind to the binding proteins, and they get delivered. They get delivered via the bloodstream to all the cell, tissue, and organs that need them, and there are a multitude of them.
Yes.
And they get dropped off there, so they unbind. So fat soluble steroid hormones bind to globulins. One of the principal binding proteins, and not the only one, is called sex hormone binding globulin. So
Right.
it's a favorite for testosterone. Oh my God, testosterone binds so beautiful to sex hormone binding globulin. It's a favorite for estrogen. So estrogens bind so beautiful to sex hormone binding globulin. Other hormones do as well, including thyroid hormone. And they're bound up and they're carried and delivered. Now, so they're part of your normal physiology, and we love sex hormone binding globulin and we want it. Now, you can mess with sex hormone binding globulin. And as a young doctor, one of my very first jobs out of medical school is I worked for Planned Parenthood. And what a relief. I was not dealing with very ill folks. I was dealing with young, healthy women, and primarily there to dispense the birth control pill. But something in me got super uneasy, and I had to resign for that job because the whole idea of giving young women who were at their pinnacle of hormone production additional hormones sort of disturbed me in ways that I didn't understand, but it was enough for me to not do it.
Yeah.
And I was only there for 3 months.
Oh my.
Super easy gig. I resigned because I didn't like the idea of giving young women extra hormones. Now, I'm not trying to get into the birth control and the need for contraception. Everything in medicine, everything in life has its benefits and its risks. So I'm not here to comment on that. But one of the things that the birth control pill does, you're giving a young woman hormones at a time when her own hormonal output is absolutely at its maximum. So the body has ways to deal with that. So what does it do? The body and the brain reads, wow, we're putting out supercharged levels of estrogen, and we're getting additional estrogen in through the birth control pill. Well, that we don't want higher levels of estrogen that we actually are putting out. So let's just bind up the additional estrogen. So it produces additional sex hormone binding globulin.
Right.
Cool. It's part of a normal protective mechanism. And the sex hormone binding globulin elevates in young women on the birth control pill. That's one of the most common causes of sex hormone binding globulin elevations. Well, like I said, testosterone also binds to sex hormone binding globulin. If you raise sex hormone binding globulin, many, not all, young women who are put on the birth control pill bind up their testosterone and lose their libido. That's a common side effect,
That's right.
so to speak, of taking birth control pills. So mysterious.
Yeah.
Mysterious. The sex hormone binding globulin elevated, and it preferentially binds the testosterone. So it not only binds the excessive estradiol, it binds up their testosterone. Well, when you stop the birth control pill, theory says that the sex hormone binding globulin returns to normal. Theory.
I was gonna say.
There are many, many women who enter menopause, and we do, as one of the imperative blood tests on women who are entering our program, we measure their sex hormone binding globulin. And we find a certain percentage of women enter menopause with an elevated sex hormone binding globulin. And that gives us a certain challenge, and we know how to deal with it, and we do. But we want to know it, and it can mess with your program. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have an elevated sex hormone binding globulin because you were on the birth control pill. That's the usual reason. And it never went down, and it's no big deal. And you would never know it if someone didn't check it, and it doesn't interfere with your hormonal program at all. So you don't blink an eye, and a lot of folks who are treating women in menopause don't get a sex hormone binding globulin, and they do just fine. So I don't. You asked the question, that's why you're getting the answer. But there's an occasional woman who that sex hormone binding globulin is problematic.
Right.
And we find out because the hormone dose determination process isn't going as smooth as we would like it to. Now, in the menopause method, we're getting a sex hormone binding globulin. And when I see an elevated sex hormone binding globulin, I very rarely comment on it out of the gate because I know that it's not going to present a problem to the majority of women. And I don't want to load the deck and say, oh my God, you've got an elevated sex hormone binding globulin. We're going to get into trouble here, because we don't most of the time. And it's not an illness. And that was the question. That's the simple version of the question was, is it a problem? Is it a disease? No, it isn't.
Thank you for
that.
that.
Can it be a challenge? Yes, when it's quite high, as it happens rarely, we need to do something about it. There's another case that the sex hormone binding globulin has been elevated. There are certain methods of treating women in menopause where they're given very high doses of these hormones. And that, in many instances, will raise that sex hormone binding globulin. And when they don't feel good on these high doses, as many of them don't, some do, many women feel great during pregnancy and they've got super high hormone levels. But that's a whole other subject.
Right.
Some women, they're getting their sex hormone binding globulin elevated because of pellets. Oh, not a fan of pellets. Or other methods in which very high dosages are being used. Oh, not a fan of that either. There are rare exceptions where high estrogen levels are needed to preserve cognitive function or to restore it. So you never say never in medicine. And there's other things. There's most people who are treated with thyroid hormone, the physicians know what they're doing and they're testing it, and they don't allow patients to get into excessive levels of thyroid hormone. And not many people are going to allow excessive levels of thyroid hormone because these hormones are so powerful. They get side effects when they get excessive levels. They get jittery, their pulse goes up, they have heart palpitation, they feel like they're on 18 cups of coffee instead of one. However, there's a certain number of patients out there that I encounter that they're on elevated excessive levels of thyroid hormone treatment, and their sex hormone binding globulin is elevated, because sex hormone binding globulin will also bind up thyroid, and it'll be driven up by excessive levels of thyroid. So I wanted to give you an exhaustive search, and oh my God, the time is up, and I've got that hard stop.
Yes, you do. So I'm going to give you a minute to prepare for whatever it is you're going to do.
All right. Yes, thank you. I must leave, though, here.
It's
so, Carolyn, as always, and all the people who've joined us, so enjoyable our time together. And
happy weekend. Enjoy, laugh, love, be happy, and just, have a fabulous Until Tuesday when
Until
we meet
Tuesday.
again. That's right.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Esther. See you, everybody, later.